All right. So we're talking about the good fight of faith. And we've talked about how can a fight be good. But the Apostle Paul told Timothy, there's a good fight. I've fought the good fight of faith. Fight the fight of faith. And what we find is that faith sometimes doesn't align with where we want to go, right? Faith doesn't even align with what we can see. And that's why it's called faith, because it is believing in something greater than us with the expectation about God. The expectation is He's going to do what He says He's going to do. Is God trustworthy, in other words? Faith says God is trustworthy. Are you with me? Faith says God is trustworthy. So even when, and I've titled this Between a Rock and a Hard Place, how can you fight the good fight of faith when it seems like God puts us, and we're following God. I want to follow God. How can I be following God and I'm in a bad spot? I'm between a rock and a hard place. And you know what a rock and a hard place is. You can't go backwards because there's nothing good back there, and it doesn't seem like there's anything good to go forward either. And you're stuck. And it's like, why am I stuck here? I'm supposed to be following God. Why am I stuck here? Father, why did you bring me here? And that's what this whole story is about today. In Exodus 14. It's really kind of a continuation. If you want to summarize the Bible, summarize it this way. The Bible is the story of God and His creation, mankind. The story of search and rescue. Seen those stories on TV, the search and rescue stuff they do? Man, I'm getting to where it's like, I can't watch this. This is like too intense for me. I just want to watch Three Stooges and be happy at this point. Some of this stuff is like so intense. But search and rescue is a real deal. And this is the search and rescue in the Bible of God searching out the creation that He made that He loves very much. When we get ourselves in a bad way, He says, I'm going to come and get you if you'll let me come and get you. Right? So sometimes we get ourselves in enslavement to things. We get enslaved to things and God comes with deliverance. Sometimes it's sickness and God brings healing. Sometimes it's conflict and God brings peace. Sometimes it's despair and God can bring hope. Time after time in the Bible, we see the stories about God's people. The people He created to be in relationship with Him, they get in trouble and God comes to the rescue. I bet you have a story where God's come to the rescue, right?
Amen.
I think all of us have a story in one way or another. God's come to the rescue. There are things we can control. There are things in life we have absolutely no control over. And either one of those things, sometimes things we can control put us in a bad way. Sometimes the things we have no control at all over put us in a bad way, right?
Amen.
And the Bible is full of those stories. The Bible is full of bad circumstances that people have gotten into that put them in a rock and a hard place. And how God has come to their aid. How God has come to rescue them. He makes a way, the old timers used to say, He makes a way where there is no way. He makes a way where we can't make a way ourselves. And understand that God can make things happen that we can't do our own, right? I'm sorry. God can do things we can't do on our own, right?
Yes.
And He better show up because there's times we need Him bad. Proper English would say badly. We need Him badly. The Apostle Paul said to live is Christ and to die is gain. In other words, he said, when I live this life, regardless of what it brings, I'm living for Christ. And when I die, that's good too, because I'm going to go be with Him. I'm living for Him here. And when I leave this life, I'm going to be with Him there.
Amen.
And that's a good thing. So we can have victory now because we're living for Him, and we can have victory in eternity because we're living with Him. That is our hope. That's the only hope we have. Right? If we're hoping the economy fixes itself, that's kind of a silly hope, isn't it?
Yeah.
If we're hoping the prices at the grocery store go down, that's a silly hope too. So we got to trust in somebody bigger than us that can do something for us. And the question is about faith. Hit that next slide for me, Mason. Wait a minute, I forgot one. That's all right. Go back to the other one. Just sit right there. I forgot to put one in there. Mason's going, I'm never doing this again. The question is this: how much do you trust him? I can't answer that for you. Only you can answer that. How much do you trust God? And it's one thing to talk about it in here, because it's easy to talk about it in here. It's another thing to leave this building and go live our life, and come Monday morning, it's like, how much do you trust him? So, Exodus 14 tells a story about God and his people and a bad situation they got into. And God put that story there because it's relevant to us today. It happened 3,000 years ago, and it's still relevant to us today. Because we end up in a bad way sometimes. We end up between a rock and a hard place. And the only thing that changes this with faith is if I choose to follow him. I mean, God can't be an option among many options. He's either is or he isn't the option, right? He either is or he isn't the way, right? And if he's relegated to just a choice of some other things, well, that's not going to work. This story in Exodus proves that God is more than able. He is more than able to help us because he's proved himself. And here's the other thing. This is in the Bible, and I've said this before, and I'm going to keep saying it. If you hear a preacher anywhere that says, oh, the Old Testament, you don't worry about that. Don't read the Old Testament. Don't talk about the Old Testament. Just stay out of the Old Testament. If you hear anybody like that, run. Turn them off. Turn off the TV. Close whatever app you're listening to, and run away. Because the Bible is relevant from Old to New Testament. It's relevant from Genesis to Revelation. It has something to say, and Jesus Christ is on every page. And you see Jesus Christ in the story of the Red Sea, the parting of the Red Sea. And throughout the entire walk and in the journey of the wilderness of these people. So, that's a sidebar. That's not part of the sermon. I'm just telling you, if you hear somebody say, don't worry about the Old Testament, shut it off. Because you need to know it all. Because God reveals who he is in all of it. And we need to know who he is. If he's revealed it to us, we need to dig into it and find out who is he. And it's a lifelong search. You're never going to know all of it. All right. So, here is the thing. God can release you from your rock and a hard place, whatever it happens to be. I'll give you a rock and a hard place some people are living in today, in the last 3 years since COVID. People dealing with anxiety and depression is up. It's close to 40 some odd % of people are dealing with anxiety and depression since COVID. Well, God can either help or he can't, right? Because anxiety says there's no peace and I can't trust anything. And anxiety is the absence of peace. Well, Jesus is what? Prince of Peace. So, I'm not saying there isn't valid reason to look at the world around us and go, I am saying there's total valid reason to say, Lord, I can't control any of this, but I can control me. And I want you to replace anxiety with hope. And replace chaos with peace. That's what I'm saying, and Jesus can do that. Right? So, it doesn't mean you're out of the storm. It just means that he can do that in the storm. All right, so Exodus chapter 14. I'm going to read all of it because I can't piece it together. Normally, my go-to version of the Bible is the New American Standard Bible. I like that version, and I'll tell you why. When I was 16, 17 years old, we used the King James Version at our church, and I was missing it. It was like, all these and nows, and I just couldn't get it. So I drugged myself because I was able to drive. I was driving, and I drove to the Bible bookstore, and I said, I can't understand the King James. Do you have anything that can help me? And so this guy laid out all these Bibles. And, this is this. And this one's closest to the King James. It just takes out all the these and the nows. I go, that's the one I want right there. And I've used it ever since. So I use the New American Standard. But I'm telling you this morning, I'm not going to read out of that right now because I'm going to read out of the New Living because it flows so much easier. And this is a long passage, and I won't have to explain a bunch of stuff later. You'll just flow, and we'll read it together here. So I really like it because it kind of points out some of the hot stuff that was happening, because these people were, not only did these people kind of turn on Moses, they were sarcastic about it. And this version points it out, and it was kind of interesting to see. So, let's go to Exodus chapter 14, verse 1. And it says this. Then the Lord gave these instructions to Moses. Order the Israelites to turn back and camp in Pi-hahiroth between Migdol and the sea. Camp there along the shore across from Baal-zephon. And Pharaoh, this is God talking, telling Moses, Pharaoh will think the Israelites are confused. They're trapped in the wilderness. And God says, and once again I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and I will chase after you, and he will chase after you. I have planned this in order to display my glory through Pharaoh and his whole army. After this, the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. So the Israelites camped where they were told. Now let me just tell you real quick. You think God led them to that place. God led them to that place. He told them exactly where to go. And he told them exactly where to go to put them between a rock and a hard place. He told them, go right there. I want you to go right there because you're going to be defenseless right there. It's like, what? Why would he tell them that? Because God told Moses, here's why. Because I'm setting Pharaoh up. That's what he's saying. I'm setting Pharaoh up to thoroughly annihilate him. I'm going to remove him from your life forever. So I'm telling you, Moses, I'm going to put you in a place where you're going to be defenseless, but here's why I'm doing it. God is good to let us know sometimes when things don't make sense, it doesn't mean he's not on the job. When things don't make sense, it doesn't mean that he doesn't know what he's doing, right? Are you with me?
Yeah. Amen.
All right. So that's why God did that. And Moses said, okay, that's what we'll do. He didn't argue with God and say, well, there's a better way. He did exactly what God told him to do. And that's the example for us. Do what God tells us to do. Personally in your life, whatever the Word says to do, do it. Don't wait. Verse 5. When the word reached the king of Egypt that the Israelites had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds. What have we done letting these Israelite slaves get away? So Pharaoh harnessed his chariot, called up his troops, took with him 600 of Egypt's best chariots, along with the rest of the chariots of Egypt, each with its commander. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. So he chased after the people of Israel, who had left with their fists raised in defiance. We're out of here, Pharaoh. God has freed us, Pharaoh, right? They're leaving singing a song, it says. With their fists in the air, we are free at last, okay? Pharaoh says, I'm going to get my revenge. And that's what he's starting to do. So the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, verse 8, the king of Egypt. So he chased after the people of Israel, who had left with fists raised in defiance. The Egyptians chased after them with all the forces of Pharaoh's army, all his horses and charioteers and his troops. The Egyptians caught up with the people of Israel, and they were camped beside the shore of Pi-hahiroth. I'll get it. Across from Baal-zephon. As Pharaoh approached, the people of Israel looked up, and what does it say they did? They panicked. They looked up and panicked when they saw the Egyptians overtaking them, and they cried out to the Lord. And they said to Moses, why did you bring us out here to die in the wilderness? And I love this little bit of sarcasm. They said to Moses, were there not enough graves in Egypt? You brought us out here to bury us all out here because there weren't enough graves in Egypt? You brought us out here to die, Pharaoh. I just love that sarcasm. You can usually tell the depth of the frustration of a person by the sharpness of their sarcasm, right? And these people were panicked. They said, oh, fine, Moses, what'd you do? Bring us out here? There weren't enough graves in Egypt? So these people were frustrated. Verse 12, didn't we tell you this would happen? No, I don't think they did. It says, didn't we tell you this would happen when we were in Egypt? We said, leave us alone. Let us be slaves in Egypt. Well, no, that's not the truth, because they were crying out to God, you've got to free us, because we're under bondage, and they were in bad way, right? So it's better to be a slave in Egypt than a corpse in the wilderness. Some people get so used to their chains. Listen here. Some people get so used to their chains, they just are, it's more convenient to be a slave than it is to fight it.
Yeah.
To an alcoholic, to an addict, addiction of any kind. And sometimes it's easier to live with it than it is to fight it. But God says, hey, I can release you. I can free you. Moses told the people, verse 13. Moses told, here, I'll put it in our terms. Moses told the people, stay calm and move on. Okay? He said, verse 13, Moses told the people, don't be afraid. Just stand still and watch the Lord rescue you today. The Egyptians you see today will never be seen again. The Lord himself will fight for you. Just stay calm. Now, how can Moses speak that? Because God told him what he was going to do. God says, I'm going to set them up, and I'm going to eliminate them from your life forever. So Moses believed God. Question is, do we believe God? Do we believe in faith? Everything he says. I'm not saying things are going to be perfect. Trust me, things are not going to be perfect. But if he's with us, he's fighting for us, right? If he's with you, he's fighting for you. Which means what? There's a fight. There's always a fight. This is not, I'm going to get saved and I'm going to live in a Sunday school picnic from here on out. Because it doesn't work like that. There's a fight. And these people, they'll tell you what happens. They get on the other side and they have to fight there too to take the land. They claim the land, right? But ultimately, when Joshua sent them through, they still had to fight for that land. So, and I'm way down the road on the story there, 40 years or so. But the point is this: He will fight for us. But understand, there's a fight involved, right? Are you with me? And I think the mistake we make as Christians sometimes is we get there and we think it's a destination, and I quit fighting, I quit thinking, and then we get frustrated. Well, where's God? I thought God answered all my prayers, and how come I'm going through this? Well, he's going through this, but you don't know why he's bringing you through this. He was working with the Egyptians, kind of the same. What God's the same yesterday, today, and forever, right? He was setting them up so they wouldn't have to worry about this anymore. And sometimes we don't understand what his setup is, and we give up way too soon, and we give up way too easy, don't we? We say, well, I don't know if God knows what he's doing. Is there anything else I can do to help me? Right? So the Lord, verse 15, said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the people to get moving. I love that version. Don't sit there and complain. Stay calm. Start moving. Pick up your staff. Raise your hand over the sea. Divide the water so the Israelites can walk through it in the middle of the sea. And God says, on dry ground, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they will charge after the Israelites. My great glory will be displayed through Pharaoh and his troops, and his chariots, and his charioteers. When my glory is displayed through them, all Egypt will see my glory, and they will know that I am God. See, that's what God's doing in our life. He's doing stuff in our life to bless us, to bring favor in our life, but it's so that people can see his glory, right? That's the other thing sometimes we do. We give up too soon. I got my blessing. You know people who get their blessing and you never see them in church again for a while. Right? Awful quiet in here. But that's the truth, isn't it? We pray, oh God, you got to help me. And God helps. And he answers. And it's like, where are they at? I haven't seen him for a long time. I'm not picking. I'm just telling you the truth, right? God was working on his plan, and he does the same thing for us. Verse 19, the angel of God, who had been leading the people of Israel, moved to the rear of the camp. The pillar of cloud also moved from the front and stood behind them. God was protecting them. We don't know how often God protects us. We can't always see it, but we can sure experience it, right? So that's what happened. The cloud settled between the Egyptian and the Israelite camps. As darkness fell, the cloud turned to fire, lighting up the night. But the Egyptians and the Israelites did not approach each other all night. Then Moses raised up his hand over the sea, and the Lord opened up a path through the water with a strong east wind. The wind blew all night, turning the seabed into dry land. So the people of Israel walked through the middle of the sea on dry ground, with walls of water on each side. Then the Egyptians, all of Pharaoh's horses, chariots, charioteers, chased them into the middle of the sea. Look at verse 24. But just before dawn, the Lord looked down at the Egyptian army from the pillar of fire and cloud and threw their forces into total confusion. He twisted their chariot wheels, making their chariots difficult to drive. They said, let's get out of here from these Israelites, the Egyptians shouted. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt. And all of a sudden they knew, this isn't normal. This isn't right. Something's going wrong. And what did they know? Well, they'd already seen God throw 7 things down in their culture that destroyed kind of their culture, all the plagues of Egypt. So they knew God was able to do that stuff. And at that point, God hardened their heart, blinded their eyes. And they said, we're going after him anyway. And all of a sudden they remember, yeah, he did that 7 times and he's doing it again for them. And now we're in a bad way. So, when the Israelites, verse 26, had reached the other side, the Lord said to Moses, raise your hand over the sea again. Then the waters will rush back and cover the Egyptians and their chariots and charioteers. So, as the sun began to rise, Moses raised his hand over the sea, and the water rushed back to its usual place. The Egyptians tried to escape, but the Lord swept them into the sea. Then the waters returned and covered all the chariots and the charioteers and the entire army of Pharaoh. Of all the Egyptians who had chased the Israelites into the sea, not a single one survived. But the people of Israel had walked through in the middle of the sea on dry ground. And as the waters stood up like wall on both sides, verse 30, that is how the Lord rescued Israel from the hand of the Egyptians that day. And the Israelites saw the bodies of the Egyptians washed up on the seashore. Kind of gross, but proving God did what he said he was going to do. Verse 31, when the people of Israel saw the mighty power that the Lord had unleashed against the Egyptians, they were filled with awe before him. They put their faith in the Lord and his servant Moses. Man, isn't that awesome? Now, it's one thing to have been there to see it. It's another thing to read this and say, wow. But here's the thing. Do you believe it's real? Do you believe it's real? Yeah. See, God does what he says he's going to do. And the choice is, we either believe what's in that Bible or not. And if not, faith isn't going to help you. And there are people, and I don't understand this. I do not understand this. I don't understand how some people can go through Bible college, go through seminary, come out and say, I'm not sure I believe all the Bible. What did you just spend 6 years doing? I don't get it. But I think that's how Satan blinds people. What's the old line? They get too smart by half. I think sometimes that's what happens. You get too smart by half. Because I believe that absolutely happened. And if you think about it, we've all had Red Sea experiences in our life that we couldn't do something about. We were between a rock and a hard place, and if God didn't show up, nobody was going to show up. And he's done it for us, hasn't he? Hasn't he?
Amen.
Who do you share that story with? Do you share that story? I know there's a high challenge. I'm just going to tell you, I'm probably, from here on out, I'm high challenge. I think Jesus is coming soon. Amen. And I'm going to be high challenge on you. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but I'm saying, do you share that story of what God did to you? For you? Who do you share that with? And when do you share it? And if you haven't shared it yet, when are you going to share it? I'm just asking. Just asking the question. They went through that rock and that hard place. But God let that happen. He said, I led you here. I purposely brought you here. And there are things that happen to us, we go, I don't know why that happened. And I'm going to tell you, sometimes we make our own mistakes and we get ourselves in our own place, and God meets us where we're at. He will chase us down. A loving Father chases us down. He says, I'm going to chase them down. I'm going to chase him down. I'm going to chase her down. I don't want her to, or him, to miss this. And God will do that. But there's sometimes God, even though we're right on, we're doing what we say, we go, how did this happen? Why is all this mess happening? Because God's going to show you something he can't show you any other way. I'm convinced of that. I wish there was another way. I wish you could just open up a book and go, yes, this is the way it is, right? But it doesn't work that way. Because sometimes we have to experience. We can see it, we can read it, but sometimes we have to go through our own Red Sea experience, don't we? Because that's the only way God's going to be able to prove to us, or in our experience, or what he wants us to do. He's going to show us something specific he needs us to know for our purpose in his kingdom in our time in history. And it's hard as all get out to have to go through that stuff, isn't it? It's hard as all get out to do that. But I'm telling you, a good God has got good on the backside of that stuff. We just have to be patient. We just have to trust him. We have to have faith that he's not going to leave us hanging. Now, Mason, hit that next slide. There we go. They saw those circumstances. They think, why would God bring us here to die? But he does allow us to go through that. And he's got a plan. Actually, he's got a master plan. I keep hearing this phrase. I hadn't really thought about it. I hear it at work a lot. Yeah, that dude's playing, we're all playing checkers. That dude's playing chess. It's kind of fun. Hadn't really thought about it. But in a way, I'm gonna steal that line this morning. Because sometimes we're playing checkers and God's playing chess. We're playing checkers with our life and God's playing chess with our life. And not only is God playing chess with our life, I've never done this before, but he's playing 3D chess. Chess is hard enough, I can imagine playing 3D chess. But that's what God's doing, because he's got a plan we cannot see. He's got a purpose we cannot see, and the only way we're going to see it, and the only way we're going to connect to it is to say, I'm going to trust, I'm going to stand still, and I'm going to let you speak to me, God. And if you tell me to raise my hand over the water, I'll raise my hand over the water. If you tell me to start walking, I'll start walking. I'm going to do this your way. And that's the only way we get it. And like Moses, see, Moses and God were tight, right? Moses was a leader. You go, well, Moses was the leader, but Moses and God were tight because Moses trusted God. He'd been through a lot with God, so he believed God. And Moses then received word from God. God said to Moses, this is what I'm going to do, right? So sometimes we get that from God. He'll say, this is what I'm going to do. And you go, oh. But Moses didn't hesitate at all, did he? Moses knew that way. He lived out there 40 years. He knew where he was going. But he trusted God. God said, go, I'm going. All right. There is always good in God's plan because there's always a divine purpose. What that divine purpose is his blessing. God is always doing something on your behalf if you have brought him into your life and situation. The trouble is, here's our problem. Sometimes we only bring him half in. Or we make him a choice among many choices. We don't make him the only choice. We got, well, God is an option. Right? God's an option. But I got other options too. You know, you hear that phrase, I know a guy. Right? I know a guy. And sometimes we treat God like that. Yeah, I know a guy. And if that guy can't help me, I'll get another guy who can help me. But God's saying, you either let me help you all the way, bring me in. That's the only way you're going to see all of this, is to bring me in. It's the only way you're going to experience all of me, is to bring me in. Bring all of me and keep all the other stuff out. Keep all the other guys out. God is always doing something on your behalf. He's just waiting for you to activate him in your life. Just because he's slow to respond doesn't mean he's not paying attention. Right? Are you with me? Sometimes, see, he created time, we live in time, and we have our time. And I just know God needs to answer this prayer tomorrow. So God, I'm praying with all my faith that you answer this tomorrow. And God's going, oh, Steve. Steve. Let me help you understand this a little better. I'm going to answer this in my time because my timing is perfect. And then he asks this question, do you trust me? If I don't show up tomorrow, are you going to give up on me or do you trust me? If I don't answer just in that moment, are you going to say, is there anybody else out there? Are you going to go look for another guy that you know? Or are you going to trust and wait him out? Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Because remember this, God is not a resource. God is not a guy amongst a bunch of guys we can call. God is the source. Everybody else is a resource. That's not my line, that's Dr. Tony Evans. Everybody else is a resource. God is the source of all things in our life. So, the earth is the Lord, and all it contains, as one of the writers said. So if you want to get action, what do? I want to talk to the one in charge. Something goes wrong, you go to the store, something went wrong, I want to talk to the manager. Well, God is in charge. There is no one above him. You want to get to the top? Go to him first. Go to him first. We just have to have faith to trust him. Another thing Dr. Tony Evans has said on this aspect, he said, just because you can't see the way doesn't mean God doesn't have the way. Just because you can't see the way doesn't mean God doesn't have the way. It might not look like the road I'd have taken, but if he says that's the road to go on, any other road is not going to get me where I want to go. Any other road is not going to get you where you want to go, right?
Yeah.
God might be making you wait. He might not be answering in our time. But remember, he created time, so time belongs to him anyway. It's his time. He's placed us here to live in it. So he's not unaware. He's not sleeping. He's not ignoring us. He's saying, I really want to be a part. If you're asking, you want me to be a part. You hang on, but stand still. I'm working. Stand still and see my salvation. Stand still and see the way through. Don't panic. Don't complain. Don't give up. God loves to rescue his people. Have you experienced his rescue? We've all experienced his rescue. We've all experienced his rescue. I want to give you some scriptures. From here on out, I'm just going to read what the Word of God says, okay? This one came from Alan. He sent me this one. I thought, oh, he's helping me do sermon prep, and he doesn't even know it. It's awesome. Lamentations 3, 25 through 27. The Lord is good to those who depend on him, to those who search for him. So it is good to wait quietly for salvation from the Lord. And it is good for people to submit at an early age to the yoke of his discipline. I cannot emphasize this enough. Teach your children well, as the old song used to say. Teach your children well. Tell them about God. Tell them what he's done for you. You tell them that there is no other God but him. Tell them. Psalm 118, verses 5 through 9. In my distress, I prayed to the Lord, and the Lord answered me and set me free. The Lord is for me, so I will have no fear. What can mere people do to me? Yes, the Lord is for me. He will help me. I will look in triumph at those who hate me. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in people. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in people. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in princes, and I will put it this way, in the elected governmental officials. Okay? It is better to trust in the Lord. Get the next one for me, Mason. See how good I did. No, I didn't do good. Next one. That one. Psalm 62, 1 and 2 says this. My soul waits in silence for God only. I may know a guy, but I'm not waiting on that guy. I may know someone else. I may know another way. I'm not going to wait on them. I'm going to what? Wait in silence for God to show up. From him is my salvation. He only is my rock and my salvation. My stronghold, I shall not be greatly shaken. Isaiah 40, verses 28 through 31. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, does not become weary or tired. His understanding is inscrutable. He gives strength to the weary. Are you weary? Let him know. Are you tired of fighting? Come on.
Yes.
Okay. You tired of all this COVID stuff?
Yes.
Okay. You tired of all the chaos? The Lord, the everlasting God, the creator of this, does not become weary or tired. Bring him in, he doesn't get tired. His understanding is inscrutable. He gives strength to the weary, and to him who lacks might, he increases power. Though young people grow weary and tired, and vigorous young men stumble badly, yet those who wait for the Lord will gain new strength. They will mount up with wings like eagles. They will run and not get tired. They will walk and not become weary. That's a pretty good promise, isn't it? That's a mighty promise. And then Ephesians, which I read before, and I'm going to read again. I want to leave this one with you. Ephesians 3. God is able. Say, God is able.
God is able.
For this reason I bow my knees before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth derives its name, that he would grant you, according to the riches of his glory, to be strengthened with power through his Spirit in the inner man. It's one thing to be strong on the outside. It's something else to be strong on the inside, isn't it? It's what happens inside that affects the outside. So that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, and you, being rooted and grounded in love, may be able to comprehend with all of the saints what is the breadth and the length and the height and the depth, and to know the love of Christ, which surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled up to all the fullness of God. He just doesn't want to give you a little sip. He wants to fill us up. I want that. Don't you want that? That's what I want. He says he will do that. Verse 20, now to him who is able to do far more abundantly beyond all that we ask or think, according to the power that works within us, to him be the glory in the church and in Christ Jesus to all generations forever and ever. Has God rescued you? What did he rescue you from? Who have you shared that with? Who are you going to share that with? Someone needs to hear that God has rescued you. There's a ton of people out there, like William, who have no hope. They may not all look like William. Some of them are dressed up really nicely. Some people dress up really nicely and have no hope. They need to hear your story. You need to tell somebody, this is what God did for me and he can do it for you. And here's the other thing they need to hear. They need to hear that Jesus Christ brings salvation to their life. And Jesus alone brings salvation. And apart from Jesus, there is no salvation. If there's no salvation, there's no eternity. There's no hope of eternity. There's no hope that we can be with God forever. And the pain of this life becomes the awfulness of the next without Christ. If we die without Christ, the pain of this life is awfulness in eternity. It's eternal separation and nothing but pain. That is not what God wants for us. He did not create us for that. He never intended us to live like that. He wants us to be with him. And the only way to bridge that gap is through Jesus Christ. Are you with me?
Amen.
Are you following him? Are you waiting on him? Are you trusting him? I'm going to stand with you, please. What I'd like to do, I know you've been in the altar. Some of you have been in the altar. If you want to come again and pray about something, I will meet you down here. Because I'm going to tell you, you can't pray enough. In this world we're living in now, you can't pray enough. If you're a one devotion a day kind of a person, I will tell you where we're living now in the culture, it better be a 2 devotion a day kind of a thing. Because it's what it's taken to get us through, or more. I'd be happy to pray with you. I'd be happy to help however I can. I can only connect you to him. He is your help. I'm just going to help you pray. God is your help. Come join me in prayer for a few minutes and pray. If you've got somebody you want to pray for, here I'm telling you, we as a church, if you know people that you know they are not living for the Lord, and if they die tomorrow, they are not going to heaven, we better start praying for them now. Start praying for them now. None of us are promised tomorrow. None of us are promised tomorrow. Pray for that person you know that will not be in heaven. And if you want to pray, I'll come down here and I'll pray with you.